Okay, and then present. Okay. When I share it in this way, are you seeing one slide or you see many slides?
We see many slides down.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if there's a way to do it on Zoom where you can do the presenter view so I can see other slides, but you can only see one slide. I don't think so. Okay. So we'll just come back to the normal one. All right. So this is performance management. And it's part of an ongoing series that we're looking at running with COSA around professional skills and people in the professional workplace. So performance management is a key topic. It's something that is foundational understanding for both managers and leaders, because it is the thing that allows you to structure your own growth, advancement, and success in whatever it is that you're doing. You have to be able to benchmark, you have to be able to set goals, and you have to be able to chart progress. That's how you know how to evaluate. And when you evaluate, then you're able to pivot, or you're able to adapt or change, so that your success in one area does not end there, but success continues and success grows on success. So it's very important to understand what performance management is, to understand in theory a few of the different aspects of managing performance, so that as you go in your practice, you can contextualize it and learn it in your own way. But the second half of this presentation will also give you some of my own toolkit and the things that I have found to be very helpful in a practical sense. So it's got both a theoretical component to it and a practical component that I'll share later. All right, so performance management. What is it? Managing people and their performance is a critical skill, and it is increasingly important considering advancing technology and how we need to stay relevant in the workplace. What I'm talking about here is as technology advances, unless human beings find their unique positioning in organizations, human beings can actually become irrelevant, and they can be worked out of a job unless they adapt, grow, leverage their knowledge for new capability in the workplace. A few decades ago, the advent of computer technology and information systems, it really put a lot of people out of jobs, and those people had to learn new skills. Some people, maybe especially older people, exited the workplace forever, taking it as opportunities to retire, maybe. But younger people had to learn new skills in order to remain productive and add value in their companies. Now we had the advent of social media, and now we have the advent of artificial intelligence, and a lot of people are questioning different workplace functions, different roles in organizations, and different ways that human beings will remain productive and adding value, and most especially earning a livelihood through their contribution in companies. So it's increasingly important to know how the people you're working with are adding value to the company, and for yourself to know that you are maintaining your value as a manager or a leader. A lot of this comes back to giving feedback and holding people accountable. This is the foundation of performance management. You can't know if you're relevant, you can't know if you're successful if you don't give and receive feedback, and if you don't maintain communication to hold people accountable. In a sense, this is the most vital human component that we can offer: communication. It's the human connection with one another that no amount of technology will ever be able to replace. And as managers and leaders, you have to understand what your competitive edge is as a human being, and how you can continually develop yourself so that you are always relevant and over time emerge to be the most valuable person in your place of work. It comes back to feedback and accountability. Feedback is a process that is ongoing over time. It's not just something that happens once. Managers need to learn how to set and adjust realistic goals. It's a dynamic process. And goals should not be something that is felt as a oppressive or discouraging factor in one's place of work. Goals should provide motivation and provide focus. So goals should be very positive things that energize employees, not things that discourage employees or make employees feel like, they'll never achieve. Goals should be things that actually are tools in a workplace to promote a healthy culture of achievement. And it's a very valuable skill for a manager to be able to set those types of goals that really energize people on teams. So, like I said, performance management is a process. It starts with goal setting. We talked about the purpose of goals. And after goals are set, then you proceed into a cycle of communication, observation, and evaluation to support, retain, and develop exceptional employees for organizational success. Part of this process is a process of identifying successful employees, rewarding them, and empowering them to continue in their success. The other part of the process, honestly, is in identifying those employees who are not performing well and either helping them transition or pivot to a better model of performance, or honestly, finding a pathway to a different work setting or out of the organization so that they don't hold you back. So that they're not dead weight, maybe holding you down and holding your potential back. So that's really the cycle of performance management. And after you evaluate, you continue the cycle back towards setting new goals after evaluation. Why is this important? It comes back to the bottom line. It's all about It's all about profitability, really. Organizations hire staff for a specific purpose. It costs money to hire staff. And you want to hire staff like an investment that will return on the money you spent. People are paid to perform, not just to be on the team. Yes, once in a while, you may want to help out a friend who's in a difficult position and you hope that they can perform. But if you're really running a business has to be streamlined from the top down to make a return on capital. That's the reason that it exists. And if you're being faithful to people who have invested in your business, you have to look at it through this lens of performance. Not wasting money, but returning on that money. And that's a spiritual principle. It goes back to some of the precepts that we talk about Jesus teaching, that when you're invested with little and you're faithful with that, then you will be invested with more. And it's a principle of being a good steward and returning on the investment that was made in you. If managers don't hold employees accountable for performance, they are not actively engaged in their purpose. Performance management is a key purpose of managers. Employees work in a system in which they know how they are performing every day. So if you are a manager and if you're responsible for overseeing other people, performance management is part of your purpose. It's baked into your job description, and it's the reason that you have a position of authority. It's so that you can work with other people, maybe people who are hired after you, maybe people who have less specific skills than you or less leadership skills than you. And your purpose is to manage their performance. So it's really not something that you can escape if it's not convenient for you, or you don't think that it's not really something that's aligned with your personality. It's what you were hired for. Just as much as you are hired to manage the performance of others, your performance is based on your purpose, which is to manage their performance. Employees who have regular or meaningful performance management discussions with their managers are more productive and have more opportunities to do challenging work and learn new skills. This is just it's a baseline, common, intuitive knowledge in organizations that if you are engaged productively and constructively by your supervisor, you feel that you have more meaning in your work, you understand what to do, you understand your conditions for working, and you're given opportunities to challenge yourself, to grow, and to prove your potential in the company. When managers regularly meet with employees about performance, employees' engagement triples. And this is based on business research done by the Gallup Institute. It's just a baseline foundational concept. If managers are not meeting with employees become idle. They lose their sense of commitment. They're not creative in their work. And the bottom line for that is they're not productive, and their performance is not really being actualized. But when managers meet with employees, the baseline is that you get 3 times the amount of performance out of them. It's like saying you're hiring 3 staff members. If a manager only meets regularly with an employee, it's as if you've hired 3 people for the cost of 1, right? So it just makes so much financial sense in an organization that a key aspect of managers' performance is the performance management of their employees. I'm just putting this out there so that all of you guys really understand how critical performance management is in leadership. It's not just, by the way, it's not just icing on the cake. It's an essential ingredient to making the cake rise. And it's about maximizing the work that comes out of your company. Performance management is important because it causes more motivation to perform and increased self-esteem for employees in the workplace. Managers are able to gain new insights about their staff. They know new things about the people they're working with, their personalities, their skill sets. Goals are clear and jobs are simplified. Sometimes jobs are being done in elaborate ways or complicated ways that actually don't need to be done that way, but employees need permission to be able to simplify their work if the outcome is the same or greater. So it's managers who can help give employees these permissions to do things in new ways or in different ways that are actually more efficient. And the final thing is that employees become more competent. And this is a concept from mentoring or even super leadership, which is the idea that leaders create leaders. That as a leader, you're not just there to be the only leader forever, but as a leader, you create more leaders in the wake of your leadership. So when you meet with an employee as a manager, that employee becomes more competent, is able to perform new skills, is able to handle more responsibility. Your company grows and your bottom line increases. All right. As a manager of performance, when we talk about performance, there are 3 types of issues in performance. There's attendance, there's conduct, and there is performance itself. And we'll talk about each one of these 3 problems. And these are things that you talk about when you meet with employees in a managerial setting: attendance, conduct, and performance. Attendance refers to excessive late coming or poor timekeeping. It refers to frequent absences, meaning absences that follow a pattern. Maybe someone always leaves on Fridays. Maybe if they work up country, you find that they're never around on Friday because they're always trying to come back to town and they're kind of dodging work. Or maybe they only come to work after a certain hour of the day because they have another job. And you're always wondering where they are when it comes to 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. They always say they're in the field or they're somewhere else, but the reality is there's some underlying issue that's going on that needs to be looked into. Other attendance issues are excessive sick leave. There is an understandable or a normal amount of illness that a person can have in their life. But sometimes people use being sick as an excuse to not come to work because there's something else going on that they don't want to tell you about. So if you see somebody that's always appearing to be sick or always using the excuse of being sick, that's a problem. And it's worth a conversation about what may actually be going on in the background. Ambiguous field visits. A field visit is a very reasonable way to explain why you're not in office. But if it's ambiguous, meaning that your employee is not giving very many details or they're being very vague, you begin to wonder if they're really in the field on your job or if they're engaged in something else. Another issue you may have relating to attendance is people taking long breaks. Someone goes for lunch or for tea and they're gone for half of the afternoon. I also know that a very unmotivated staff member or a very bored employee can go to the bathroom and they stay there for 20 to 30 minutes. I definitely know that in my younger years when I had other jobs that were not very fulfilling to me, I myself was guilty of this. And I could even take a newspaper into the toilet and just sit there reading. Well, I was technically in office, but I'd just been on a very long bathroom break. Or sometimes you go for outings and it just takes an employee a long time to return. These are all just excuses that relate to attendance. Sometimes employees suffer from something called presenteeism. She's here, I just don't know where, right? I saw her in the morning. She must be in office, but I can't say exactly what she's doing, where she is, what she's working on. That means that somebody is giving the illusion that they're around, but you can't actually say, you can't hold them accountable. And I'm sure all of these things, any of you who have any management experience can relate to a few, if not more, of these issues that you have with staff members around attendance. The other issue you can have with staff members is around conduct. Okay. This relates to erratic behavior or work patterns, maybe even substance abuse. Sometimes in the morning, a staff member can come late, and they're coming late because they have a very puffy face and red eyes, and it doesn't look like their hair is combed, and it's very apparent they've just been drinking all night, right? And you can smell it on their breath. Even if they arrive on time, arriving in that condition and the behavior that it comes with is not professional, and you know that they're not going to be very productive in their work. Sometimes you can have conduct issues that relate to someone's attitude, being very argumentative, violent, rude, disrespectful treatment of others. It's not necessarily a personality to be violent. I view it as more of an attitude. People who are violent in some cases are not violent in all cases. Maybe there is, some conditions in their life that are causing them to be rude or disrespectful, but everybody has the potential and capability to manage themselves, manage their own attitude, and when they want, to be nice, to be respectful, and to be a pleasant person in the workplace. So if you find somebody having these issues where they're bringing this kind of toxic behavior into the workplace, it's definitely something that you'll want to discuss with them because it affects their own performance and the performance of other staff members. Verbally abusive, inappropriate, or intimidating physical contact. Some people are people who like to grab people by the shoulder when they're talking. Some of these things are just not professional in the workplace. Another one is sexual harassment. This one is something that I think is a emerging understanding for a lot of people. It's something that kind of relates to the new normal or the new culture of professional environments. When you are in a professional environment, it's like a new culture that you've entered, and there are new rules of engagement and new levels of respect that you have to have for one another. So you can say, well, in my culture, it's fine to talk to someone like this, or it's fine to talk to someone like that. But in a corporate context, you're working with people of many cultures, usually in a city or urban environment where people come from many different backgrounds. And so you have to create a new culture that uses the common denominator of respect across these differences, so that all employees feel like they are respected, empowered, and given a safe place to work at their full potential. And so some of these things that we have to learn about, or are new ways of relating with people, it's just about creating the best environment for the most amount of people. Other more obvious ways that conduct affects the workplace is theft, dishonesty, or even misappropriation of funding. These are much more black and white lines, and so it's very clear if someone has stolen money or pocketed something that doesn't belong to them. It's a very clear violation of corporate trust, and those kind of actions take years for someone to recover from in a professional sense. Usually, these kind of conduct issues are recorded. They get put on somebody's file. And so they're very serious things. If you sense that an employee has a weakness in this area, it's your responsibility as a manager to really address it when it's small, so that it doesn't become a career-defining failure for them. Because if somebody doesn't pull someone aside and tell them about the ramifications of these kind of conduct issues, it can really affect how far they go in their career. Improper access to or disclosure of confidential information. Again, a lot of these things just kind of relate to learning the new culture, the new rules of engagement in a professional or corporate context. A lot of organizational relationships are based on trust. Trust that you know what sensitive information is. Trust that you respect the company's mission and vision, and understand that it's a competitive environment, and sharing information that's not supposed to be shared can actually put your company at a competitive disadvantage, or it can put other employees at disadvantages to one another and not really value their own autonomy and achievements. And finally, we have in conduct, we have the issue of damage to property, equipment, or data. In companies, we are stewards of a lot of resources, and a company can entrust us with tools that we need to use to be effective. And if we are not good stewards to those tools, the company can make losses, and supervisors will trust you less. So all of these things are issues that relate to conduct. And again, I'm going through all of these in detail to just paint a picture of the spectrum of issues that you can have with employees that are worth performance management discussions. The final one is performance itself. And this relates to, you might say, the goals that an employee is given, the targets. It can relate to the mission of the organization itself, and probably is benchmarked on an employee's job description. So when we think about performance issues, we're talking about issues that relate to quantity. Tasks take longer than necessary to complete. We can look at issues that relate to quality, less than acceptable performance, mistakes due to poor judgment, complaints from customers, clients, coworkers, periods of high and low productivity, meaning that there's like inconsistency in someone's work. One week they're doing very well, another week they're not doing very well. And that inconsistency is an issue because you can't rely on people. You don't know, is this the week that they're going to perform, or it's not the week? You don't know what kind of responsibilities to give them because they're not a consistent person. Issues can also relate to delays or missing deadlines. Deadlines exist as agreements between employees so that one employee can hand over a product development to another employee. And if you miss a deadline, you can really let down another team that was relying on you to deliver something on time. Finally, we can think about issues that relate to poor attention to detail, not taking roles or tasks or directives seriously. It's very frustrating to work with people who you have to remind 5 times before they actually get to the thing that you've asked them to do. When somebody doesn't take the roles that you're giving them seriously, it's very hard to think of them as a high performer, because a lot of the work actually comes back onto the manager to follow up and to babysit the employee. Okay, do you experience any of these employee problems? I would say if any of you have any management experience, then yes, you probably do experience these employee problems. Problems relating to attendance, problems relating to conduct, problems relating to performance itself. So if you do have any experience with these problems, then you probably have some performance management issues. And I'm saying this acknowledging that the reality is everyone has performance management issues. Even me, who's giving a lecture on performance management, has performance management issues every week. Every week, every month. It's just the nature of the work that I'm involved in. And the only question is, how proactive am I, or are you, in addressing these performance management issues? Do you address them in an effective way, or do you pretend they don't exist and just keep working and let them build up and build up? An effective manager is somebody who knows what employee problems are and is at least proactive about trying to address them. Part of the learning is just accepting that these things exist and acknowledging that they're part of your work. Okay, if you have performance management issues and it's something that you want to work on, what are the core components of performance management? How do I manage performance and address these issues? The three main areas we can talk about are planning, management, and appraisal. Planning, management, and appraisal. The first step is planning. It all starts with a plan. You develop a job description. It describes what an employee will do. It describes what kind of knowledge, skills, or attitude an employee needs to have. It describes specific relevant equipment or tools that will support the employee. This is very foundational stuff. So I'm bringing it right back to the essential components here. And I hope that you're not getting bored, but just realizing that we're just focusing on the basics. A plan in a job description means that a job can be divided into several functions or tasks. A job description is not just the title on the page. Unfortunately, a lot of people, all they know about their job is just the title. They just know that I am a store manager, right? But the reality is a store manager has many different sub jobs or sub tasks in different categories that relate to specific functions or tasks that need to happen. And it's important that us as human beings are knowledgeable about those different areas and are reminded of them and can refer to them if we're wondering how we're doing. So once a plan is in place, a performance management tool is then developed. To develop a performance management tool, a tool is something that you can use to adjust like a wrench or a socket. A tool is something that you can use to measure, like a ruler. A tool is something that you can use to achieve, like a hammer, right? So in the topic of management, we have many different tools that we can use to do the work we need to do. So a tool that is essential to performance management is identifying key performance areas. A key performance area is a function that includes tasks which an employee is required to perform. So this is letting people know what areas of work they need to be focused on, right? If you're a store manager, what are the different areas that concern you? Is it the inventory? Is it the back office? Is it the storefront? The way that people walk in? Is it advertising? Maybe it's all of those. And maybe it's all of those at a high level. Or maybe you're just the manager of one of those areas. So the area is the first thing to acknowledge. Then you have to look at the outputs. products or services that must be produced. Each one of those areas that I mentioned has very specific outputs. If you're in advertising, what are the outputs? What needs to be achieved, right? You have to have specific outputs such as appearance in highly populated areas, exposure on roads that many people will look at, and maybe it's a billboard. Maybe it's a placement in on TV or radio. So these are things that you must do to say that you've delivered something. The final one is the indicators. And this is like the dashboard on a vehicle. It indicates, is your gas high or is your gas low? Is your battery charged or is your battery dead? Is your speed in the vehicle fast or is your speed slow? Is your engine overworking or it's underworking, right? In terms of performance. So the indicators, an indicator is different than an area. An area is just knowledge. An output is a deadline, or it's a task, or it's something that just has to be produced. An indicator is your grade, right? It's the grade that you get at the end of the day. It shows that tasks have been executed and meet specific standards or achievements. So indicators are things like time. Was it fast or slow? Quality, was it high or low? Quantity, was it big or small? How did you use the resources that were entrusted to you, right? So an indicator is one of the things which helps people know if somebody is excelling in their area of work and output, or if they're not. Okay, the second stage after you've come up with a plan and tools is managing the performance itself. So in the process of managing, you're talking about monitoring behavior and objectives. You're talking about tuning in as people go, walking alongside people, observing them. When you see behaviors or achievements that are good, it's about reinforcing them. When you see inappropriate behaviors or you see poor achievement, it's about redirecting. And where necessary, it's about providing controls, letting people know this is how far you've gone. You can't go any further in this area. It's about administering systems, letting people know about cash flow, so that they don't overspend, letting people know about daily production, so that they know that at a certain point, you don't need to produce more. Sometimes if you're producing something, it can actually hurt to produce too much because you don't have a market for what you already have. So at some point, you have to stop and go, right? And it's the manager who gives you that control. Yes, no. Too much, too little, right? Those are the controls that we're talking about. And the manager looks at the performance from a bit of an objective point to be able to say that. The third area here that we're looking at is appraisal. And what appraisal means is an appraisal is a formal meeting of employee and supervisor. It's not something that happens every day. Management is something that happens every day. It's not something that happens at the beginning. That's planning and developing tools. Appraisal is usually something that happens on a more periodic or cyclical time. So it's something, maybe it happens at the end of each week. Maybe it happens at the end of each month. maybe it can happen at the end of each day if there's a lot to be covered in one day. But it happens after a period of time where an employee has been able to do something. And when you meet, both the employee and the supervisor are able to rate some kind of achievement. You're able to identify areas that require development. You're able to determine how these will be achieved. The new areas that you're identifying where you can grow, you have to give some guidance around determining how you will achieve in those areas. And finally, in appraisal, you have to record agreements and commitments or goals. An appraisal is it's an opportunity to have some kind of reference point. It's like a landmark where you can say, okay, up to here, this is how things went. Now, the next day, the next week, the next month, this is how we'd like things to go. But in order to have structure in your growth, you have to record that appraisal so that you can refer back to it if there's confusion, so that you can refer back to it if you need to be reminded of what the specific targets were. But it just helps to structure growth. Like, if you're growing anything, if you're growing tomatoes, it's always a good idea when you grow tomatoes to have some kind of leveled structure so that at one stage the tomato can grab something and grow to another stage to grab something. So structures are very important when you're talking about growth and empowerment. It helps things achieve a certain level and then shoot for the next level. That's it. If you just followed these 3 processes, you would be a great performance manager. We could end our presentation there on performance management if you wanted to, but I know that most of you already know the stuff that I've talked about. When I've talked about the employee problems, you've resonated with them. You've acknowledged that these things exist. When I've talked about the 3 processes of planning, of management, and of evaluation, you probably are aware that these are things that you should do. But the challenge we all have is actually doing them. The challenge we all have is actually having the discipline and commitment to structure our own management in a way that goes through these processes. So this is where we come to the more practical part of the presentation. What are some real skills? What are some real insights that can help us modify our behavior as managers so that we can do the things that we know we need to do? So that we can overcome our own kind of comforts and push ourselves into our own achievement areas. So that's what we're going to look at next for the next 10, 20 minutes is what does it look like in my life? What does it look like for me? What are some things that I do? What are some things that I've learned, which are practical ways that we have internalized these processes and are doing them as managers? For me, a huge a huge area of growth is communication. And I feel like it's something that I've talked about a lot in recent years, because it's something that's really been on my mind as something that really distinguishes us as human beings from machines. And as I think about the future of workplaces, and I think about how technology is evolving, and I think about what adds meaning and purpose in our work, a lot of it just comes down to our human connections with one another. And human connection requires communication. Not just seeing one another, not just bumping into one another, but real, honest communication, open and authentic communication. Communication that connects in a meaningful way, not just a surfacey, substantive way, but a way that actually pushes things forward, causes growth in a corporate sense and in a personal sense. So when I look at the knowledge I have of performance management and my journey of becoming more effective in applying that knowledge, a lot of it comes down to communication, how I communicate and discipline myself to communicate regularly and effectively with other people. Communication requires skills. In a management sense, it's not the same kind of communication we had when we were schoolboys and schoolgirls, talking about fashion, talking about movies, talking about football. It's a different kind of communication in a professional sense. And in a professional sense, these are skills that people have to learn. We don't necessarily learn these skills in childhood growing up. So everybody comes at this topic from a slightly different perspective. A lot of communication is also based on people's personalities. And one personality is not more or less effective. We just have to understand what aspects of our personality are actually holding us back from effective communication. Some people are too soft-hearted and they don't know how to give needed feedback to people that they don't want to hurt or offend. This is personally my own background. It's my own struggle. It's something that I've had to learn how to overcome. I would often not give feedback because I felt like I like the person and I don't want to feel like they don't like me or that I don't like them, right? And I think Lydia was referring to this as a common cultural aspect in Uganda. That if you give someone feedback about their job, it means you don't like them as a human being, which is a very different thing, right? And the reality is that if you liked them as a human being, you would want the best for them. You would want them to grow. You would want them to thrive professionally. You would want them to excel in their earning capacity, right? We just have to learn how to communicate challenging things, difficult things in love to people that we respect so that they can be the kind of people we believe they can be. Another type of person may be too hard-headed and they actually end up hurting or offending others, no matter what they say, right? Some people, communicating difficult things, it just comes very easy for them, right? And it's very easy for them just to say what's on their mind. And if they're frustrated, they don't have a tactful way of communicating things so that people can receive them. And when they communicate, they end up just hurting people, pushing people away, making people fearful, making people actually want to hide rather than to show up. So in our communication, we are motivated by our own personalities. We're motivated by our own intentions. And if we're not aware of how these factors affect us, we can actually become ineffective communicators. We can put things off without talking about them, or we can hurt people by talking about them too much. But how do we help people? right? That's the middle ground that all of us as managers have to move towards in our communication. Communication is the link between the potential you have inside of you and your ability to effectively realize your goals in life by connecting with the world. Like I said earlier, technology is changing this world. The thing that won't change is our pursuit of meaning and purpose in this world. It will never change, despite how much technology we have, despite how many robots are in this world. Human beings have a spark of divine within us, and for our entire life, we are in a pursuit of meaning and purpose in alignment with that divinity. That's just what sets us apart from the natural world. It's what sets us apart from the technological world. And we will create technology that pushes us to those ends. And communication is the link we have between other bodies, right? Between me and you. The only thing that's connecting us right now that's making sense is our ability to communicate with one another. And we're using technology to achieve that. Technology is not using us. So real, honest, and effective communication is an essential way to help your employees address performance-related problems. Why is it important? Because it directly relates to the plan that you have set out. It directly relates to the management, and it directly relates to the evaluation that you have in your work with your employees. If you're not a good communicator, or you have trouble communicating through all of these stages of performance management, get help, take classes, work on it. Poor communication is not an excuse. Poor communication is a journey that you have to go on in becoming more effective. You can get help by getting feedback. You can ask your friends about your communication. You can get feedback from them. You can ask your employees about your communication. You can get feedback from them. Do I hurt you when I communicate? Or do I not communicate enough, right? That gives you kind of a spectrum of knowing where you need to improve in your communication. Right. So how do you help an employee succeed through communication? It's about clarity at the end of the day. It's about fairness, and it's about proper training, necessary tools, and accountability. Make sure your own actions are consistent with what you expect from your employees. When you communicate, authentic communication comes from character. We often say in our discipleship material that people do what you do, not what you say, right? So people want to look at behind your communication and see the character of you as a manager. Are you actually believing in what you're talking about enough that you do it yourself, or are you just commanding people to do meaningless work that you actually don't believe in? Your own actions are essential in convincing people through communication. When you communicate, your body language, your tone can communicate that you're willing to help, or it can communicate that you don't care, despite what you say. So you have to make sure that your character, your motivations are in the right place when you're communicating. And finally, in communication, timing is critical. Communication relies on doing it when you're feeling it. There's this concept in behavior modification called the cause-effect time gap. The time gap between cause and effect is one of the greatest factors in behavior modification. If someone faces the consequences of their actions 1 year later, it is not likely to change their behavior, as they will not connect the consequences directly to the action. They will rationalize all sorts of extraneous factors. My kids, for example, I have young kids, and when they're young, they learn about fire, right? They learn about a match. They learn about a stovetop. They learn about a pot that has been boiling water, right? They learn about it because they get instant feedback, not because they touched it and then 1 year later their fingers started burning. That would never create any kind of behavior modification. Their behavior changes to respecting fire because they just touched it and instantaneously they got feedback that it's not good to touch it. So timing is essential. And as a manager, when you tighten the time gap between behavior and feedback, you change employees' behavior. I know this is something that, I mean, I really struggle with this in my own office. I get reports from people all the time about programs or work that they're doing, and if it takes me a very long time to respond to a report, the employee will learn the report is not valuable. But if I respond very quickly, they learn that the report is valuable. And they start to spend more time on the report and putting the report together, knowing that I care, right? So feedback is one of the ways that you let employees know that something is valuable, it's something you care about, and it's something that they need to focus on in their work. All right. When you're communicating in a professional context, there is feedback and there is coaching. These are two different ideas that have specific skills that we can talk about. Proactive feedback and coaching will reduce the time and effort you spend on disciplinary issues and negative feedback. It will create less stress and fewer surprises during performance evaluation time. It will foster an environment of problem solving, new ideas, and professional development, and it will create confidence in delegating tasks. Feedback is about looking backwards, hence the word back. Feedback, you're looking backwards. And coaching is about looking forwards. You're thinking about the future. Feedback should be consistent. If not, then it appears there is a problem. Keep your meetings regular and address small issues. Feedback is not something that should come after a problem has built up. If feedback comes after a problem has built up, employees will say, well, you didn't tell me in time to adjust my behavior. If feedback comes after a problem has exploded, employees can often think that maybe you're sabotaging them. Maybe you yourself are not a good manager because you didn't help them adjust when the time was there to adjust. So when you're consistent in your feedback, meaning that you're providing people updates along the way, there are no surprises. A surprise is often, in a workplace, a surprise is often a very negative thing. So you don't want surprises in your relationship with an employee. And to prevent surprises, you give feedback in a very consistent, regular way along the way, so that as soon as something small happens, some feedback is given and you can monitor the situation. Feedback should be constructive. The intent is not to tear down. It should be to build up. The purpose of feedback is not to find flaws. It's not to find ways to humiliate someone. The purpose of feedback is not to fire someone. It's really to walk alongside somebody and be constructive in small ways that you can help them. Feedback should also be based on observed behavior. Feedback should not be based on a rumor. It should not be based on something you heard from someone else, or it should not be based on someone else's feedback. If you're communicating in a real and authentic way, feedback should be something you have seen directly and can comment on from your own personal experience. That way, it appears that it's honest and it appears that it's with a good intention. Feedback should be timely and given in an appropriate environment. It's not something that you should just say in the hallway as you pass somebody. It's not something that you should announce in front of others in a group, unless it's feedback for a group. It should be in a respectful way in your office or in their office so that they can take it without it hurting their egos or without it becoming a rumor. Feedback should be specific and descriptive. It should not be ambiguous. Feedback is not about saying, I just don't like the way you work, right? Saying that is not constructive. It's commenting on somebody's personal nature. If you're going to give feedback, give it in a way that is specific and descriptive enough that people can actually do something about it. Feedback is objective. It's not a personal attack. It's not a personal taste. It's a professional observation. It's not about you as an individual. It's about looking at things objectively through the lens of the mission of the organization. Provide feedback on a regular basis and be positive. A lot of times, if we're impatient, feedback comes off as being negative. But being negative cultivates a negative energy and a negative culture and a work environment. And people don't like to work in those circumstances. It doesn't bring out the best in people. What brings out the best in people is a mentor. And mentors are inherently positive. Unless it's something that you really have to hold someone accountable to, and you really have to call out as an undesirable behavior, and somebody needs a wake-up call, then it can come off in a critical angle. But it should always be with the intention of positivity. Feedback, do's versus do nots. You should use I-related messages. I observed that you have been late this week on Monday, Wednesday, and today. Or I have been informed by your immediate supervisor that you were late on Monday, Wednesday, and today. Use your own personal perspective, right? Don't say things such as, there's a rumor that you often do not get to work on time, right? Because that, when you bring it in that lack of objectivity, you bring in room for excuses. Take responsibility for the feedback that you're giving. If you're giving somebody feedback, don't back down from it immediately. Sometimes feedback can be challenging, so it has to be from your own conviction. It should be done in a sober and confident way that you're able to stand by your own insight about what would help this person, right? So you have to take responsibility. You can't give someone feedback and then say, well, that's just what other people were saying, right? It doesn't help somebody. What helps somebody is when you speak to someone man to man, right? human to human, professional to professional, woman to woman, whatever it is you want to, however it is you want to say it. Own your feedback. Don't make it somebody else's feedback. That way people know that you are serious and you care about them. When you give this kind of feedback, yeah, people are going to have all kinds of responses. Some people will simply deny. What's the problem? Right? Some people will minimize. Why are you making such a big deal about this? People will project, blame. You never told me that. Why are you bringing it up now? Right? That's making it my problem, right? When you come up with an excuse like that, you're trying to make it someone else's problem, the employer's problem, the manager's problem, or another person's problem. People will divert and point to other employees and say, well, Stephen comes in late too. Michael comes in late too. Why are you only focusing on me, right? People can also start to get hostile. They can feel like they're personally attacked and they can say, hey, stop attacking me. Get off my back, right? Why am I the one you're singling out? Other people, especially if they're very embarrassed, they can just be quiet. They can just shut down. Sometimes when someone receives something very difficult, they can just, it's like they disappear. Their body is there, but their spirit has just disappeared. They've vanished. And they begin not looking you in the eye. They begin not talking to you. They begin avoiding you. These are all things that employees may respond with, but don't let any of these things change your conviction or your insight. Like we said a minute ago, your feedback is something that you are responsible for. If you believe in it, follow through with it. If you believe there is a problem, if you're convicted and you have insight into a specific behavior, you should follow through with it, even when somebody starts making excuses, makes pointing at other people, tries to come up with reasons why it's not their responsibility. Don't let an employee's response divert you from the fact that you feel like it's the right thing to do. That is about your character as a manager. Now, coaching is a different thing. Coaching is about looking towards the future. Coaching is not just about feedback. It's about creating a solution. So coaching and feedback can happen back to back. It can happen one after the other. It can happen in the same session. But feedback is about looking forward. This is where you can now be solution-oriented. But don't try to fix an employee's personality. A personality is not something that can easily be changed. You can't change an introvert into an extrovert. They'll just be fake. You can't change someone who is a predominantly thinker into a predominantly feeler, right? All of us have different compositions of our personality, and those are a combination of, our gifts from God. They're a combination from our family backgrounds, both nature and nurture. And they're not something that in a professional context you need to be addressing. Instead, in a professional context, you should be focusing on habits and behaviors. Habits and behaviors are things that individuals can change and control on a day-to-day basis. Somebody can control whether or not they come to work on time. Somebody can control if they show a good mood to a customer, right? But somebody cannot control if they are energized by going to a party. Some people get energized by social interactions. Other people get exhausted by social interactions. Those are things about our own kind of personal energy that are much more personal and do not entirely relate to a professional context. In a professional context, you're there for a certain number of hours a day, 9 to 5, and in those hours, you have to show up and deliver something. And you can focus on being your best self during those hours. You can focus on desirable habits and good behaviors. Coaching should also not be about life counseling. Now, this is something that I actually struggle with a lot because a lot of the people that I work with, I actually really care about them. I'm friends with them, and I want the best for them in future. And it can be hard for me to actually give difficult feedback and not start talking about their meaning and purpose in life because I'm also just kind of naturally I naturally enjoy spiritual conversations, and I want to help people understand things from a bigger perspective than just their 9 to 5 job. But the reality is, as a manager, you're not there to cause someone's spiritual awakening. You're not there to save someone's soul. That can happen after work hours. That can happen on the weekend. That can happen in your personal time. At the office, you're there to be a manager. You're there to keep it professional. You're there to help someone advance their career, and you're there to help the organization improve its bottom line. Keep it professional. It's up to them to determine the life implications of your professional counsel. Sometimes you have to give people bad news. It's not up to you to determine what their next job is going to be, right? If they have to leave the job, they have to find a new job. It's not your responsibility to coach them to a new job. It's your responsibility to provide the best for your employees, to get the most out of them, and to help the organization move forward in its mission. Another thing you should not do when you're coaching is micromanaging. And this is another thing that I also struggle with. Sometimes if an employee is not doing something well, you want to do it for them. You want to step in, you want to hold their hand. It is easier as a manager to do things for other people because you have more skills and experience than them. But you are hiring people so that you can be more effective. And so you need to empower them to do things on their own. You don't need to be their babysitter. You don't need to be their therapist. In the end, their problems are their problems, not yours. And if you focus too much on the problems of other people in the workplace, it will actually hold your own growth back. It will hold your own professional development back. So some tips on coaching is start small, address things before they build up too much. Let people know what to expect. Don't give them surprises. Take time to reflect. Sometimes it's not wise to speak immediately when you've given some feedback and now it's time to help someone know what's next. Sometimes it takes a few moments, sometimes it takes a few days. But be thoughtful about any biases that you may have. Be clear about what your goal is and take responsibility for your role. Have an effective conversation. An effective conversation is not just giving somebody information, but it's about knowing that they have received the information, knowing that they have internalized it, and it has made some meaning to them. Effective conversation is about inviting people into a space, not making them feel forced. It's about being open, being friendly. It's about taking responsibility for what you're doing, not just feeling like you're forced, both sides are forced to do it, but you want to do it for a specific purpose or reason. Effective conversation is about sharing a goal or sharing your experience, and also it's about listening. After you've communicated, it's important to listen so that you get on the same page with the other person, so that you harmonize, so that you feel like you've built some consensus, creating a solution. Finally, effective conversations also close. They don't end open and drag on forever. There's a close to the conversation. You know that you've both come to some sort of consensus. You know that somehow you've wrapped the thing up so that you can both move on in your own mental space to what's next. Closing is as important as initiating. Closing allows us to separate, to get up from the table and to do our own work. So your job as a manager is to keep learning. If you do feel like these communication skills are something that you need to learn more about, there's a whole world wide web full of information about performance management and everything that goes into it. I'd encourage you to take note of this website, Coursera.org. Coursera, Coursera.org. It's a website that has an incredible amount of lessons, courses, and skills that you can learn in a professional context. I came on here and I just Googled performance management. I selected performance management in the subject area of business and in English. And it gave me 425 results for courses that you can take on performance management. A lot of these are free at a certain level. Some of them you have to pay for if you want to get an actual certificate at the end, but a lot of them are free just to go through them. And these are from very respected institutions like the University of Minnesota, University of London. So your job is, as a manager, to keep learning and developing additional tools. One tool that I have found very useful for myself is called a communications matrix. And anybody that has worked with me has heard me talk about this a lot. So I apologize if it's something that I've over talked about, but for people that want a very practical tip on communicating effectively in the context of performance management, this is something that I use a lot. It starts with a visualization of the different spheres of your influence. And so all of these different circles represent different aspects of my work. In my work, I have an audience in senior leadership. I have an aspect of my work leading country level teams. I have an aspect of my work leading regional coordinators. I have an aspect of my work dealing with our staff, dealing with our partners and stakeholders, dealing with our donors and our beneficiaries. And all of these different aspects of my work require a different structure of communication. There's different periods that I communicate with them, and there's different methods that I communicate with them. But having everything in a simple visual layout like this helps me to really keep focused on what are the main things, the week-to-week things, and what are the the less consistent things that just need to happen over longer periods of time. As a personal tool, I also include some personal aspects that relate to my own personal growth, my own mental health, my own friendships, and my own family, my own relationship with my kids, my parents, my in-laws, and my children. So when you plot this out in this way, you can distill it into a matrix of different audiences that you have in your professional life, and then different types of meetings that you have with these different audiences. So the example of our senior leadership team at the top, there's two types of meetings that I can have with this group of people. One is a monthly check-in that we do, and it happens 1 to 2 hours. So in a month, it's a 1 to 2 hour commitment with this group of people. But during the month, as need be, I can touch base one-on-one with the different individuals of that senior leadership team if there's a specific issue I need to talk with them about. Another audience that I have is our country leadership teams. And so each country that we work in, we have a leadership team that is important for me to stay in touch with. And these have a weekly rhythm to them. So every week, I'm meeting with different country leadership teams. It is a bit, it has, in Uganda, it has taken a bit of a different shape because I actually work in our Uganda office. So I actually see these people more consistently. So this one has changed to a monthly meeting, but I meet with our Rhonda team every week online because I don't see them physically in the office. It's important for me to schedule time to touch base with them. Otherwise, I can forget what's going on with them. Tanzania, we've also added, since I put this together, we've also added Kenya and Burundi and Congo. So those are other weekly meetings that I have. Other than regional country leadership teams, we have regional coordinators, and these are functions of our organization that are not governance related, but are skill related or service related. So we have the services of finance, communications, and different program development. And see, these are individuals that have very specific skill sets, technical advisors maybe, who are not governance related, but are important in moving our organization forward by providing different administrative services. And just for me to stay in tune with what they're working on, I try to meet with these people on a monthly basis. I can also look at our staff, for example. So staff is a very big audience, and it includes everybody that's working with the organization. And it's unrealistic for me to expect that I'm going to meet with all of our staff because I don't have that amount of time or energy or brain space to have that number of deep commitments. But what I can do is commit to meeting them in the context of a fellowship so that I can know them by name, so that I can know their personalities, know what they're thinking about, and learn about them from a perspective of relationship building or leadership development. And so for me, I intend to connect with our Kampala staff, for example, on a weekly basis in our staff fellowship. I intend to meet with our staff in Rwanda, maybe our staff in Tanzania, more on a quarterly basis. Just touching base with them and having them know me and me getting to know them. The main purpose that I want you to take away from this is about structure, and that performance management and communication requires structure. Building a structure keeps your performance management machine running smoothly and helps you discuss issues when they are small before getting large and awkward to address. I'll tell you, for example, years ago, before I had grown into this kind of structure, I would only talk to our Rhonda leadership team, for example, when there was a problem, right? And that would happen maybe once in a month or something like that. And so the nature of our relationship became awkward. Every time they saw me calling or every time I saw them calling, I knew it was because of a problem. And so when your relationship becomes primarily based on problems, it creates a unfriendly and even toxic work environment. But when you are touching base with people every week, you're actually creating a space for healthier relationships and talking about things before they become problems. So your conversations actually become very enjoyable and mutually respectful. When you have this kind of structure set up, it's very important to follow through. Your efforts are only as good as your follow through. Create an action plan for how to measure progress, how to follow up on meetings, and correct course if things go off track. What if things are not getting better with your employees? You have two options. One is to reset. It means to go back to the foundational description of their job. It can involve giving somebody a second chance through a verbal warning or a letter of expectation or concern. But the second response you can have is progressive discipline, meaning you reach out beyond your office to somebody else who can help you and provide accountability. A lot of times this means engaging with human resources or upper management or bringing in another person to the case. You cannot fire somebody unless you have involved another party in the decision. In an organizational context, really, you can't fire somebody on your own. It has to come after several attempts to reset and after you've gotten some counsel from other coworkers or supervisors that it is time to either suspend somebody or to terminate somebody from their work. I've covered a lot, and there's a lot of systems out there for progressive discipline. There's a lot of systems out there for feedback and coaching. There's a lot of systems out there for structuring performance management. What system works best for you is whatever system you can start to implement. Every organization is unique, and it is up to you as a manager to work with your leadership team to provide contextualized systems that work for you and forge the path forward that works best. I spend a lot of time in our organization learning about what other organizations are doing, looking at other systems and trying to see how would that work in Cornerstone? What would it look like to try and do something like that in our organization that people would actually embrace and take ownership over? So a lot of your work as a manager is actually providing practical solutions that work in your context, that empower you and the teams that you work with. At the end of the day, your effectiveness in addressing employee problems is up to you. It's not somebody else's responsibility. That's the responsibility of management. Your success in performance management will be reflected in the success or failure of your teams, which will determine the trajectory of the rest of your career and the journey of leadership at large that you are on. So please rise to this challenge. Understand it as a critical aspect of your own personal and professional growth. Understand that nobody is going to do this work for you. The work has to be done by you. And that is the value that you add to companies. It's the value that you add to organizations. It's the reason that people spend money on hiring you. And it is the reason that your business or your work will thrive. And in the end, if your work thrives, your career thrives. In conclusion, there's just a few points to keep in mind. Give regular feedback to employees, no surprises. Timing is critical. Address issues small and early. Engage in timely conversations with employees who are not meeting your expectations. Keep your goal in mind, be an active listener, and follow through with anything that you discuss with employees. Reward and celebrate success. It's important to cultivate a healthy work environment that is based on progressive successes. When you celebrate success and reward it, it gives the illusion that everything is moving in the right direction, that you're just moving from victory to victory. It doesn't matter that they're small victories. All that matters is that people believe they're in a thriving workplace that is growing and that is moving in the right track. Finally, own it. This is about your own career growth. The only person at the end of the day that benefits from this is you. It's your value that you bring to a company, and it's your career that you are building and being an effective manager and creating healthy and productive workplaces. Thank you very much for letting me share with you today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Eric. Wow. I don't know where to start from, but we don't have a lot of time. We have 10 minutes to close. I only want to give one person a chance, those that have a burning question. Then I also want to share about, I want to share my learnings as we have some share or something. Okay, so thank you, Dr. Eric. You can see there's a lot of clapping for you in the for members. Thank you people for being here. Again, I want to allow one question. We have 9 minutes. I know we are all heading to, most of us are heading to the sports gala today. Yeah, but thank you so much. For me, my learning, I was, as you started, I had this point of I had a point of organization hire staff to perform. You know, there should be return on the investment in terms of salary paid. So if you're having staff you're overseeing and they're not performing, know that you are cheating the organization, and yet the organization has a goal to achieve. That was very key for me as a manager. And then also in conduct, we should let people know that there is a culture being created. You know, new cultures we should adopt. There should be a corporate culture that people have to adopt too. That's also a takeaway from me. Someone shouldn't come with their personality just because they've been rude and angry with their parents and they can beat their siblings, showing anger to everyone. It is a new culture they have to adapt to. And then we have to plan, we have to appraise, and then we have to manage. And then lastly, how do we condition and grow cultures as managers? How do we condition and grow cultures as managers? So I want to allow one person to give us a question. If there is no question, We just want to thank you, Dr. Eric. I mean, you have lots of the thank yous. Yeah. Oh, Pfizer had a question. How easy or hard has it been for you to apply these concepts in your work while working in an organization that has a different culture or structure from what you have shared?
Are you talking about Cornerstone in specific?
Yes, I think she is. I just got closure. Great breakdown. Thank you. That's Doreen. Thank you, Dr. Eric. We deep appreciate you. I leave a better manager. That's Enoch. Someone is missing the gala. Yes, so it's only Pfizer who had a question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's in my professional context, it's clear that I have a much more structured and corporate approach to my work than average in the organization. And the organization is very family, youthful, developmental environment that's heavily on the side of mentoring, giving people endless chances, being very forgiving. But the truth is that if you move completely in that direction, you'll actually lose your effectiveness as an organization. And so different people in leadership bring different things, and the organization is a balance of all of the competing tensions that you bring with your skills and competencies. And so someone like Philip, who is my main counterpoint, is extremely, extremely valuable in his ability to connect with people and make people feel like they belong, make people feel like they're part of something very meaningful in their lives. So he has very specific skill sets that are different than mine. Neither of us are the organization, right? The organization is this different culture that we are stewarding, and we bring our different skill sets to this thing that we're stewarding to make it effective. And so we respect one another. We get very different kind of personal feedback on our own leadership styles. People that give me feedback that I'm not very present, that I just rush through things, that I kind of take care of business and then move on. It's the negative aspect of the corporate culture, but I try to create a balance. And in spite of everything that I maybe know, in spite of every way that I function, I'm not forcing this on Cornerstone. I'm just trying to help us move our culture into a successful balance of everything. So I think all of us have to know what the culture balance is. They have to know the hard skills, and they have to know the soft skills, and they have to know what is best for the organization, when to push it and when to not push it. And that's what makes you effective in creating maybe an enjoyable place for people to work in.
Thank you, Dr. Eric. Another question is from Comfort. How do you manage performance of employees who work remotely? And then the other one is from Sam. Dr. Eric, involving organizational brand, organization culture, and behavior is very key. As a manager, how do you deal with an employee who seems incompatible to the culture? Yeah. So 2 questions for you. Remote workers and then incompatibility.
Yeah, remote workers it's a unique challenge of this age of digitalization where people can actually work from home, and you find them driving across town doing something else, right? When they're supposed to be working from home. But it's true, like you can work from home and you can multitask. You can work from home and cook while you're attending a workshop. I mean, it's possible. I think the key thing is that you set goals and key performance indicators. And those key performance indicators have to be things that a person can achieve, whether they're working remotely or in person. It's much less of an issue when somebody is in office and you can see them at their computer, you can see them making phone calls, you can see them doing paperwork. But when you can't see somebody doing that kind of stuff, it becomes very important that you have key performance indicators. What are the indicators that prove somebody has been working, somebody has been trying, right? If you don't have those and somebody is working remotely and they're not being productive, how do you know they're even working? So it's just something that you have to develop as a manager. What are the tools and indicators that make you know you're getting your money's worth from an employee? Yeah, certain employees need to move on from organizations over time. The best way to do that is to drop small hints along the way and to continually, kind of give people feedback. To be fair to other people, you have to do things in a slow, progressive way that doesn't involve surprises. So you have to let people know that maybe they're pushing too hard in one way. Maybe their work style is not so compatible. You have to give them clues that you're not really satisfied, and at some point, difficult conversations may need to happen if somebody's, really not suited for a certain workplace. But it can also happen organically, where people just realize, you know what, I'm actually just much more of a business person, and this mentoring stuff is not really fulfilling me. So when I get the opportunity, I will move on. But it's your responsibility to be true to your insights. So if you're really just not feeling like somebody is very relational and if you're not feeling like somebody's in the right place, it's your responsibility to keep pushing them a little bit and to keep letting them know that, something's not quite fitting well. You can keep trying it this way, the other way, but maybe, it's just not going to work for you. But do it frequently over time so that people don't end up getting surprised or frustrated.
One last question from Spepcal. How do you handle an employee who has favors from top management?
Yeah. Well, that comes back to being sensitive to and being wise about competing tensions. This idea that a workplace is the center of everybody's competing interests, and that, the workplace is not Eric Kruetter, the workplace is not Lydia Biogero, the workplace is not Philip Ajok. It's something that exists, that we've all created, that we're all stewarding. Sometimes a senior leader has a special favor for a certain staff member, and it can frustrate you when that staff member is not performing. But it's your responsibility. You've been hired to train, to coach, to manage that employee. And if you are frustrated and you're losing patience, it's fair for you to take that feeling to your supervisor and let them know that this person is not really performing in this area. There may be some other special considerations as to why we're keeping them here. Can you help me to understand the bigger picture? if this is really just a personal or family thing, I can respect that. I mean, sometimes businesses are family affairs, and you just have to deal with the eccentricities of a family because they have the ownership at the end of the day, and you are hired to advance that ownership. And part of that ownership is their legacy. It's their kids, right? So you do kind of have to work with some of the eccentricities, but it'll help you to understand and be sympathetic to them if you can talk to your manager about them or your supervisor, so that you can work within their interests as well. But if it's so frustrating to you that you're just fed up and you feel like it's toxic and you feel like it's unhealthy, find your way out. Find a different place that's a more free and fair work environment that empowers everybody for their own contributions.
Wow, very, very good answers. Last one. How do you restore a healthy work relationship with a staff you as a manager have abused both verbally and emotionally? That's from Alice, and that will be our last one. I think Alice should also pray for us as we close. Thank you.
You have abused both verbally and emotionally. Now you want to restore a healthy work. I think that you have to be open with other people about your own understanding of your shortcomings. Sometimes letting people know about the things you know about yourself helps other people to feel better about you. By recognizing your own problems, by recognizing your own shortcomings, and by, if possible, asking for forgiveness. I mean, those are huge ways that you as a manager can heal relationships. Asking for forgiveness and letting people know that you're aware of some of the things you've done wrong and would like to be a better, more effective manager are ways that you can regain people's trust. But trust is much more easily, it's something that comes very quickly, and it's something that it takes a long time to come and it takes a quick time to go. So to lose somebody's trust, if you abuse them verbally and emotionally, it can take a long time to restore that trust. So it is something that as a manager, like you, it's a very special thing. And that's why you have to watch yourself and work on yourself, because when you do make mistakes, those mistakes are much harder to unwind than they are to create. So you have to be a very thoughtful manager. And if you do make mistakes, let people know that you've made mistakes and ask for their forgiveness.
Thank you very much once again, Dr. Eric. This has been amazing. I want to thank people that have been here since the call began. Thank you for giving us your Saturday, and I hope it's been worth your time. Let me ask Alice if you're on the call to pray, and we close.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you so much, Lydia. I'll pray. Father in heaven, I want to thank you for this wonderful time that we've spent together this morning. I want to thank you for each one that has been able to attend to this call. Thank you for Eric and the wisdoms that he has shared with us. I pray that, Father, you may help us put this into practice as we become better people, as we build organizations and our relationships. May you be the guide that we may be able to do as you instruct us. I pray for a great day ahead for each one of us. In Jesus' name I prayed. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Amen.
Have a good day.
Good at you too. Thank you so much, Lydia.
Good
Much
day.
appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Yeah.